Hello and welcome to Unit 9. So this is only going to be a couple of lessons. It's pretty short. It's our statistics unit. This unit doesn't have a lot of calculations, especially today's lesson, more just discussion points and talking and thinking about math and how things happen. So today, what we're going to talk about is data collection. Data collection is like when you do a survey of something. So if I want to know like how many people have dogs in the class, I'd say how many people have dogs. That's me collecting data. We're going to talk about the problems that come with collecting data, like what you could do to maybe make the data not very accurate, right? Problems that happen when collecting data. The first one we're going to talk about is bias. So bias is when you already have a view on something, right? So for instance, suppose a person asks, don't you think the price of a movie ticket is too high? The way that they've asked that is showing that they have a personal bias against the price of ticket. They already think it's too expensive. That's their bias, right? So their feelings have made them write the question in a certain way to maybe get a response that's in their favor. Right? If I went around and I really liked the Edmonton Oilers, I have a bias for the Edmonton Oilers. So if I went around and asked questions about who your favorite hockey team is, so saying who's your favorite hockey team, I could use my bias to say, do you think the Oilers are one of the best teams or something like that? And that's putting that out there that I obviously think that they're my favorite team. They're one of the best teams. That is a bias. My feelings are influencing the question. It also connects largely with the use of language. Okay, so the way in which you ask a question is very, very important. So, for instance, in this question, I again have my movie ticket. I say, don't you think the price of a movie ticket is too high? Whoa, that line went all over the place. So, when I ask that question, my language is already putting the idea in your head that the movie tickets price is too high. So instead of asking the question of what do you think about the cost of movie, I'm now putting it out there that it's too expensive just by the use of my words, right? I'm kind of putting that thought in your head where it's like, yeah, movie ticket prices are too high because you've heard somebody say it. So the use of your language when you do a question is very, very important. Another problem that we have with data collection, and this is a major one, is the timing in which you collect information. So when you ask something is very, very important. This example here talks about your feelings about winter tires. So if I asked you, do you feel you need winter tires in the middle of August? You might be like, no, I don't need winter tires. Like, it's not a big deal. I'm good at driving in the winter. If I ask you in January, right after a major snowstorm, do you think it's important to have winter tires? Your opinion might change because the timing of the question has changed. Now you're driving through awful snow. You're like, oh yeah, I wish I did have winter tires. They're really important, right? So the timing in which you ask something matters. A good example of this is if I asked you, how do you feel about math class? And I asked you that right after we did something fun. I never do anything fun, but maybe after one of your other math teachers did something fun. And you're like, oh, yeah, I love math. That was a great class. I love math. And then a week later, you have a math test and you don't do well on that math test. And then I ask you, how do you feel about math? Well, your opinion now might change. You might be like, I hate math. I failed. I hate math. Right? The timing in which I asked you the question has changed how you answer that question. Okay, privacy. Um, Sometimes people ask questions that someone might not want to participate in it, right? Like they might not want their answer to go out there into the public. A major one we see with that is voting, right? So your vote in Canada, if you ever go vote for your mayor or for the government, the federal, provincial government, your vote is private because you should never have to tell everybody what your vote is in case maybe you want to hide it from your family. Maybe you really believe in something, but your family believes in something else and they might judge you on what you voted or what you said. Having privacy allows you to answer properly and answer the way that you truly feel. Okay, so people might not want to participate in a study if they have to openly say what's going on. The example they gave over here is people might not want to participate in a study on weight. They might not want to answer how much they weigh if it meant telling everybody, right? It meant going and standing on a scale right in front of everyone in the room. That can be very intimidating. People might not want to participate like that. Now, if you said, okay, we're going to keep our weight private, nobody will know whose weight is whose, and we're going to just keep it secret, but we want to do a study, now people might be more willing to show their weight to the person who's collecting the data. Okay, cultural sensitivity. So cultural sensitivity means you have to be aware of others' cultures and their beliefs. So for instance, this question talks about if you ask people their favorite way to cook ham, and that was the question. You said, okay, what's your favorite way to cook ham? And you gave them 3 options. You could barbecue it, bake it, or fry it. The problem is some people might not eat ham. In some religions, for instance, eating ham is just not acceptable. Maybe their culture is more vegetarian too, so that could be a cultural belief of theirs, of a certain area of people or something like that. Maybe someone just doesn't want to eat ham. But because you've asked them, what's your favorite way to cook ham, you never gave them the opportunity to say that they don't eat ham. So a better way to state that question would be, if you eat ham, name your favorite method of cooking it. And that way you allow everyone to participate and kind of give their stance on how they want ham cooked. They could have the option of saying, I don't want to cook ham. I don't want ham cooked. Ethics. Ethics dictate that collected data must not be used for purposes other than those told to the participants. So ethics means you're not lying at any point, right? You're telling the truth. So for instance, if you said to your classmates, I want to know your favorite kind of chips so that when I host a party, everyone will have their favorite kind of chips there. And you went out and you found all their favorite kind of chips, and then instead you use that data to sell the chips to your friends. And you're like, oh, I know everyone likes ketchup chips. So you brought all these ketchup chips and started to make a profit off it and sell it. That would be unethical. You lied about the reason in which you were doing something. A big one for this is data collection doesn't always have to be about surveys. It can be other types of data. It could be scientific data. And ethics in science is very, very important. So for instance, back in World War II, when Nazi Germany existed, they did lots of scientific experiments on people to test the body and see how it reacts to certain situations. And they collected a lot of data, and some of that scientific data would have actually been useful. However, they did it by torturing people, and they forced those experiments on humans. That's extremely unethical, right? That is not an appropriate way to collect data or collect scientific information. So because of this, the world of science actually just said, you know what, we're going to destroy all your data and we're not even going to use your science because it was collected unethically, right? You're lying about what was going on. You were doing things in a non-proper manner. Whenever you're collecting data, you must be upfront about how you're doing it and why you're doing it. The cost. The cost is a major effect on collecting data. So for instance, if the best way to collect data is printing questionnaires or something like that, it may cost a lot of money to print those questionnaires and hand them out to get proper data collection. For instance, say I want to do a survey. And I said, the only way you can do this survey is if you drive to me out in the country and you come and do the survey. Well, some people can't afford to come drive out into the country. So now I'm only collecting data for those people who could afford to come participate in the survey. Right? The cost does matter, and it needs to be considered when taking into account how you are collecting your data. Time, how long it takes to collect data. So if I wanted to do a survey and I only gave you 1 hour to complete the survey, that might be not nearly enough time for everyone to come and do that survey. For instance, right now we're doing online tests, right? So I'm collecting data. I'm collecting how you're doing on your units. It would not be fair, in my opinion, to say that, okay, to do this test, you have half an hour and it has to be a Friday, 3:30. You have 30 minutes to do it. That is not a long enough time to collect the data properly. Right? That's putting too much pressure, too much time constraint on how people can truly answer that survey, in this case, the survey being a test. So the amount of time you give people does matter. Awesome. We're going to look at some questions here, and we're going to talk about what might be wrong with this survey, and just discuss one of these words or definitions when looking at these questions. So the first question says, a survey is conducted to find out if citizens think that local government should provide more money for youth activities. The question was asked, would you support an increase in taxes to create more skateboard parks? Okay, what is wrong with this question? Why is it not a good question for a survey? So if you think about this, I would say the major part is probably the use of language, right? That's a big problem here. The reason why is because of how they've asked the question. They were trying to figure out if the government should provide more money for youth activities. What they asked, though, is would you increase taxes? That almost always gets a negative response, right? People don't want to increase their taxes. So instead of saying, should we spend more money on youth activities, they talked about, would you want increased taxes to create more skate parks? That is not a good way to ask that question because now you're making people think of increased taxes, not youth activities. The second issue with this question is they were trying to figure out if they should provide more money for youth activities. But what they asked, do you want to create more skate parks? Those are two very different things, right? Skate parks are a youth activity, but some people don't like skate parks and they associate that with something maybe that they're not a fan of. So instead of asking, should we provide more money for youth activities, they've specifically narrowed it down to one activity that somebody might not support. And again, your use of language here is very important. A better question would be, would you like the town to provide more money towards youth activities? When I say it like that, I don't mention an increase in taxes. I don't talk anything about you would have to pay more money. I don't talk about specific activities like a skate park. I just say at this point, it's just youth activities. It could be soccer fields, could be playgrounds, could be basketball courts, could be skate parks, could be anything. We'll figure that out later, but do you want money spent on youth activities? And you see the difference in these questions, and the use of language is very important. Awesome. Example 2. Kublu and Ernique plan to open a shop in Saskatoon that would sell traditional Inuit crafts. To ensure Saskatoon is the best place for their business, they want to survey residents to find out how popular Inuit crafts are. Kublu knows that they would get the most accurate results if each household in Saskatoon is surveyed, but Ernique points out that is problematic. Why is that problematic? So if you think about this for a second, try to think about what's wrong with that idea. See if you can come up with a problem for that. Okay, so hopefully you thought about it a little bit. There might be several problems. My biggest problem that I see with this is probably, if we look up here at our definitions, the cost and the time. And you can kind of make either argument, right? Cost and time would be an issue. If you wanted to survey every house, that would take an extremely long time. You would have to go door to door when people are home, keep track of, yeah, that person answered, no, that person didn't answer. The time it would take would be incredible. If you decided that, okay, we'll just send out a mail or something like that, and then they can respond, the cost of getting every person to answer would be a lot. The cost of getting every citizen, as a people of Saskatoon, to respond could be significant. It could be very expensive. This is why you hear people doing like sample surveys, right? They survey just a group within the population and then they let that data represent all of that town. Because the cost and time of figuring every single answer is a lot. Example 3. A sales representative sets up an online survey. The survey offers a free MP3 file of a song that was downloaded from the internet to everyone who completes the survey. The company has not bought the rights to the song. Okay, what is the problem with this? There's lots of problems. Let's talk about the first problem, which is probably the biggest problem, is this is unethical. The reason it's unethical is you should not be bribing people to complete a survey. So by offering a song to do the survey, you're bribing people to come and do your survey, which influences your results. Somebody might really like that song and they want it for free, so they're going to do the survey for you. And now you're bringing those people in to do your survey. You're kind of choosing a group of people, which is giving a bias to it. The second unethical part is you don't own the rights to the song. So you should never be giving away somebody's song. I mean, that's just actually it's illegal. Napster, right, used to do it a long time ago, and other companies used to sell downloaded music illegally. If you don't own the song, you can't be bribing people with it. The other big issue is this has bias to it. So you will be attracting people who like that particular song, which means they have a bias to that song and might also have a bias to your question. Right? So for instance, if we think about, I'm going to offer free hockey tickets if you come and answer my survey, then what I've done is I've collected hockey fans to come and answer my questions. And those people have a bias because they're a group of people that all have something of interest. Same with this question. By offering a free song, I'm attracting people to come and answer questions who like that particular song or that particular music. And now my survey is going to be skewed because I've collected a group of people that have a bias to them. So for instance, maybe the question was, what's your favorite type of music? And if I'm offering a country song, I'm obviously going to attract people who like country music, which is then going to skew my information. Okay, example 4. Pranesh wants to write an article for the newspaper on sports-related injuries. He believes that there's a correlation between contact sports and sports-related injuries. One day, he asked members of the football team the following questions. How many sports-related injuries have you had during your years of playing football? Okay, what's wrong with this question? So again, you could come up with several issues here. And I think the biggest issue that you probably have here is, again, this is an unbiased, or this has bias. So you went out and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the correlation between sports and injuries, especially contact sports and injuries? And then you ask the football team. Because you only asked football players, those people have a bias, right? Football is a sport that has a lot of injuries, typically. So by only asking the football players, I'm creating a bias in my answers because most of them probably have had some sort of injury. Now, if I went and asked, say, basketball, which is also a contact sport, and I said, how many of you have had injuries? It's a contact sport with less injuries, so I'll probably have a smaller result of injured people answering that question. By only asking football players, I created a bias, which means it'll affect the way that the results come out from my data collection. Example 5. In the month of January, a city planner administers a survey in a community to identify the need for a new outdoor park. The following question is asked. How many times per week do you or your family visit outdoor parks? The biggest problem with this, the question is actually quite good. How many times per week do you and your family visit outdoor parks? That's a good question. The use of language is strong. There's no real bias there. But the issue with this question would be the timing. You ask people how often they go to outdoor parks during January. January typically does not have a lot of people outdoors at parks. So you have gone and you've asked how often you use a park during basically their dead season, right? It'd be like asking how many people right now are using the beach at Sylvan Lake. Well, no one's using the beach in January, but if I asked you in July or August how many people are using the beach or how often per week, you would probably have a way higher result. So the timing of this question is significant to getting the results that you wanted. Example 6. Students in a grade 9 physical education class are asked to complete a survey related to overall physical health. One of the questions on the survey is, what is your current body weight? We've already kind of talked about a body weight problem. Uh-oh. My computer is going crazy. I don't know if you can see this or not. Okay. I don't know if that recorded or not. We'll see. One of the questions of the survey is, what is your current body weight? And we've already kind of discussed that. So by asking people their body weight, that is a privacy issue. A lot of people don't want to disclose their weight, especially to teachers or in front of their peers, right? It's kind of a sensitive subject to some people. So a lot of people would rather not disclose their body weight to other individuals or groups, especially if it's not private. So the problem is, if the teacher, say I'm your phys ed teacher and I'm like, you need to tell me your body weight, people will probably comply, meaning that they will tell me their body weight, but they might skew their answer. So if I'm maybe worried that I weigh too little, then I might say a higher number. If I'm maybe worried that I weigh too much, I might tell you a lower number. And because there was no privacy to being able to answer the question, I'm now lying. And when I lie, I'm changing the data. And I'm not giving you proper data collection or accurate collection of data. All right, the last one. Hopefully our computer doesn't go all crazy. It says a grocery store employee conducts a telephone survey of people living within 10 kilometers of the store. To help determine what meat products to sell, she asks, what type of red meat do you prefer? Okay, I would say the biggest issue here is the use of language. The goal of the question, was to figure out what meat products to sell. However, the question asked, what red meat do you prefer? And by asking that, you're now getting people to focus in on red meat. If you said, what kind of meat do you prefer to purchase? I would probably say chicken. If you said, what type of red meat do you prefer? Now I'm changing my answer to specifically a red meat, and chicken is not a red meat. So I now would say maybe hamburger, right? You asked with poor use of language, which is going to skew your results on what meat you wanted to sell in your store. Awesome. With all these questions, there is like other issues you might be able to think of. You might be like, well, but this could be an issue with that. This could be an issue with that. And you're 100% right, most likely. So if you feel like there was other arguments to be made for questions, that's fine, as long as you can justify what you want. So for instance, for example 7, this last one, I believe that use of language is a big issue here. You could also say that culture is another issue, right? Like you could say, well, this is cultural because not everybody eats meat. But I didn't ask, do you eat meat? I just said, what type of red meat do you prefer? And I'm forcing you into answering a question about red meat. So this is a question that could have 2 very justifiable answers. As long as you can justify your answer to these types of questions, you'll be fine. Okay? And try your best just to pick the best problem that you see with data collection. I hope you're all doing well, and